Hello there, role players of the Brigade and beyond. Ray Guy here for another video. Today's video is going to be another one in my Dresden series covering the Dresden Files RPG. Today's topics are twofold. They are going to be on power level and refresh points. What they are, why they're important, and what you're supposed to do with them. So, let's begin. Refresh points. What are they? They are, if you're a player, they are points given to you by the GM to build your character with, using the templates and the powers and stunts, which will all be covered in separate videos, to build them up to a playable character in conjunction with your aspects on your character sheet. They come in multiple different variations, but that is what they are in essence. They are points given to you, and there is things to keep in mind as a player. The more you spend of those points, those refresh points, the less fate points you will have during gameplay. I will explain this when we go through character creation properly, but that is the summation. The more you spend, the less fate points you'll have in a session at the start. Also, when building your character, you can only spend up to the one less than the maximum you've been given. So, say for example you've been given 6 refresh points to build a character, you can only spend 5. If for some reason you spend more than that, or you lose more than that during a session, you can lose your character. The reason this is, in sort of narrative terms, spending all your refresh is like running out of free will. It's a kind of a narrative idea that if you've committed so much power, expertise, training to this idea, to being this thing, you become this thing and you're unable to change from it. That's the idea in the book. So you mustn't spend all of it. That's something very important. You must spend one less than the max you have, which would also leave you with 1 fate point at the beginning of a session. But again, I'll cover that more when I go through character creation. Now, power level. Power level is more for the GM. It's a concept in the books, and what it basically means is how many refresh are you going to give your players? How many skill points are you going to give your players to build their characters? This has multiple implications for how the game's going to go. For example, the less refresh you give them, less points you give them to build their characters, the more the game is going to tend towards a kind of more horror, kind of tense action vibe, because they're not going to have the big, scary powers. They're not going to be able to do a lot compared to a character with a massive amount of refresh. And again, the more refresh you give them, the more the game will transition, the more kind of thematically it will become more pulpy, more action oriented, because they're able to throw on a lot more power and they'll do a lot more stuff, and they can take a lot more punishment potentially depending on what their character is, what they've done with it. So as a GM, to keep in mind, the lower the refresh level, the more kind of horror oriented. The higher the refresh, the more pulpy action it's going to be. It's also, as a GM, you need to think about one of the things that when talking to other Fate and Dresden GMs is, where do you want your campaign to go? Where do you want their power level to get to? Because where you start it, that's the beginning. That's how much they have to start. But they have to grow from there. So if you set it really low, they've got a long way to go before they get, world-breakingly powerful. But if you set it high, they've already at a kind of plateau. They can only go further up into ridiculousness levels of power. So you need to think about that. Something very important, that if you want the game to start off with them, say, in a neighbourhood, and it's just them going up against a rival gang or something like that, a criminal kind of thing, and not as supernaturally as the refresh, start low. Then they've got room to grow. If you want them to be movers and shakers, to be taking on, say, the White Court or working for the White Council, start pretty high so that they can build their characters. as a GM as well, the power level restricts the characters they're able to make. So if you don't want them to play, say, wizards, champions of God, you know, something like that, a white court vampire, full white court vampire, setting a lower refresh means they haven't actually got enough points to buy the abilities they need to fulfill that template to get that character. So that's something to bear in mind. Now in the book, there are four main power levels to choose from. And I'll just go through them briefly for you. So the first is called Feet in the Water, and that's 6 refresh. 6 refresh, can't do this, with 20 skill points. And that means they have 6 refresh points to spend on buying stunts and powers and that sort of thing. Well, they can only spend 5, remember? 5, remember? Because they have to leave 1 left. And 20 skill points to go into skill points. So far so good. And that is quite a lower end of the scale. So things like a fully fledged werewolf, not really. A wizard, nope. You're looking at things like maybe a white court virgin, maybe a low powered emissary, possibly a true believer. This sort of level, there isn't a lot of customization options at that lower end, but there's plenty of room for them to grow. Then you've got the next level, which is up to your waist, which is 7 refresh and 25 skill points. So now some things are becoming available, like you could possibly play a fully fledged werewolf at this point, maybe like a wizard's apprentice kind of thing, and you know, there's some customization options for the ones that don't really require a lot of abilities to get that template. Then the third option, you've got chest deep, which is 8 refresh and 30 skill points. And by this point, things like the wizard and the white court vampire are becoming available. They have enough points to buy the abilities they need to fulfill the template for them to become that character. And finally is submerged, which is 10 refresh, 35 skill points. Now that is the higher end of the scale, and they could, by that point, each additional refresh can really change how a character works, and they can get quite a power boost from a refresh. So by that point, they could be throwing around some serious magic. They could be a combination of things, like a werewolf that can also do magic, or a true believer who might, have some thaumaturgy going on, that kind of thing. Now those are the 4 main options you get in the book, but you are free to make your own. You're free to make less than 6 or more than 10. But, bear in mind that has an effect on the kind of vibe your game's going to have. Just for example, Submerged 10 refresh, that is the kind of power level that Harry Dresden from the books is at the beginning of Stormfront. That's the sort of refresh level he was at with the skill points, and they sort of break that down in the actual book and give you an example. Whereas if you wanted to go to like a true mortal, you could go less than 6 and have a true mortal. It would still work because of how they work, which I will cover again in another video. So that is a sort of a brief explanation of how refresh works and what it kind of relates to you, and how the power levels work, and what as a GM you've got to think about before you say, okay, I'm giving you this much, have at it, make your character, so you know what you're letting yourself in for. Okay? Well, I hope you've enjoyed that video as much as I've enjoyed talking about it, and I look forward to bringing you another Dresden video soon. Until then, guys, take care.